Six had laid out a silk robe for him, and he slipped it on. The silk was chilly against his bare skin, and he felt quite underdressed as the diminutive alien came to get him. "Can't I put shoes on or something?" he asked, but she shook her head, her tentacles waving in little waves he found oddly soothing. "You will be comfortable enough," she said. "Just come with me." Again, it wasn't an invitation or a request. But Marco swallowed and tightened his robe, hearing a quiet lullaby as he did so. He followed Six down the hall. It was 7 a.m. GMT, and the house was beginning to bustle with activity. Bright lights gave a pleasant glow to the hallways and rooms branching off, imitating sunlight during the long lunar evening. Li Jun glided from room to room, some on clear domestic duties, some with more pressing business. Six stepped aside from each Li Jun, submissively, and Marco figured she had to be the last on the totem pole. He felt a little sorry for her. His pity melted like ice on a hot stove when she led him through a door on the second floor and into a windowless room. She grasped the robe with her tentacles and pulled it off him, her strength much greater than his own. What the hell?" he yelled, grabbing for the robe as she pulled it away from him. "Please, Marco, relax." The soft voice of 13 floated over to him, and he relaxed immediately. He understood it was part of their skill to mix emotions with other senses, and resented it. He covered himself as best he could with his hands, and glared at her. The room was dark, but he could make out at least 2 Li Jun milling in a corner, and 13 was at the far end of the room, adjusting the controls on a box that stood against the wall. It was probably twice as big as a coffin would be, wider and deeper. Marco jumped as Six began putting sticky white electrodes on him, her tentacles quick and precise. Some went on his neck, some his forehead, some behind his ear. Others went on his chest, back, thighs, and she darted in with one tentacle to place one exactly between his balls and his ass. Blood surged to his face and he moved to pull it off, but she caught his hand. "Please, don't remove the electrodes," she said. He snarled and batted her tentacles away, and she retreated. He didn't know if he had won his little rebellion, or if she was really done. "I know it seems new, Marco, and possibly somewhat startling, but it is all necessary. Once we go through this last test, we can determine we can discuss the terms of the patronage." Not sure this patronage is a good idea, he thought, but kept his mouth shut, only to have it pried open by Six, stuffing a breathing apparatus into his mouth. He expected it to taste like rubber, but it was an amazingly neutral taste. Nothing good or bad or noticeable. She fitted the mask behind his ears. 2 inserted small tubes with putty-like washers into his nose, forming a seal. "We are going to place you in a sensory deprivation chamber, Marco," 13 said. "You will feel nothing. Taste nothing, see nothing, hear nothing, and smell nothing. We will be stimulating parts of your body, encouraging hormones, synapses, other things, in order to read you better. This is our first step in creating our art. It's really your art, because all of your work will be flavored by your passion." There's that word again, he thought. Marco wanted to refuse, to see what would happen. He wanted to stand up, to say he didn't want the patronage, and what? Go back to Earth and live in his miserable dark apartment and write? No agent would touch him if he refused Li Jun patronage. The only career ahead of him was to make coffee, or maybe open his own coffee house someday. Just as a quick aside, folks, if this is too much, step away. It's all good. Don't worry.
There's no more physical contact involved, but it does start to get emotional and psychological from the rest of this scene.
With what money and business sense, he wondered. Did all artists really go through this? Was this a dirty secret of patronage? "This will last approximately 15 minutes. If you encounter any distress, just press the red button. That is the emergency release," 13 said, as Marco tried to avoid the tentacles pressing against his bare back, guiding him into the chamber. That's not so bad, he thought. At least this messed up dance has a safe word. He went into the chamber and spotted the red button on the ceiling. The door closed, and Marco was sheathed in darkness. It was a frightening darkness. the kind that made him open his eyes wide, desperate to drink in any light at all. He jumped slightly as pumps engaged, and viscous fluid began to gush out of faucets at the back. It was quite warm, nearly the temperature of his own body. It filled the chamber quickly, and he breathed a little quicker, the claustrophobia pressing in. He thought very hard about the little button on the ceiling. Once the fluid closed over his ears, he could hear nothing, not even his own frightened breathing or his heart pounding. He tried to hum, make any sound, but whatever the liquid was completely shut down his eardrums. Now the fluid had covered him, filling the chamber completely. The warmth matched his body heat perfectly, and his skin didn't even register the small currents caused by his own movements. God, he would have to endure 15 minutes of this? He breathed deeply and tried to relax. It was peaceful, floating here, but with no stimulus at all, his brain began to race. Had it been 15 minutes yet? Certainly 5 had passed by now, 1/3 of the way there. What were they tracking? He had no idea. The electrodes were soft and barely noticeable on his skin, even the ones between his legs. He shifted in the water, trying to force a current. He tried to touch his face, clasp his hands, but although he could tell his hand met with an obstacle, his brain did not register that he had touched anything. Vertigo gripped him, and he flailed in panic, his limbs reaching out to touch the walls, but finding nothing. She'd said to press a red button, but when he could see and feel nothing, how was he supposed to find a red button? He tried to scream into the mask, but his ears couldn't catch the sound vibrations in his own head. Sensory deprivation, idiot, he thought. Calm down. Panting, he slowed his movements and concentrated on breathing deeply. He wasn't in pain. He could breathe. And he was fine. And this was for only 15 minutes. Right? And it wasn't total sensory deprivation either. He could smell something coming through the tubes, a distant smell of baking. It wasn't steady, it more had the sense of walking past a kitchen as someone pushed a door open, letting some of the aroma escape. What was it? Cookies? Marco's father used to bake cookies. It was their Thursday night ritual. Bake cookies, watch a movie or a football game, and he'd get to stay up a little later than usual. They'd started it soon after his mother had died, and it always brought the sense of safety, of love, of slightly bittersweet memory. After he had moved out, he continued baking on Thursdays, just for himself, and he'd send his dad email every Thursday night to talk about the latest movie or football game. When he finally got his dad set up with a vid phone, they'd had phone calls. He had tried to share his Thursday night ritual with only one other person. Penelope had had to work late that night. She had apologized, but she never really got how important Thursday nights were to Marco, and he didn't bake for her again. She was a pastry chef. She always did the baking anyway. His father had never worked late on a Thursday. As her memory surfaced, he felt the bitter disappointment he'd felt that night. The painful betrayal. A taste touched his tongue then, coming through the mask, cinnamon and sweet, turning hot after a moment, like the cinnamon candies. Those candies had been on a coffee table the night before his friend Reggie's 13th birthday party. He'd been 12, waiting with Joanne, a family friend, for Reggie's mother to stop futzing with his tie back in a bedroom. Marco had eaten a cinnamon candy and started in surprise when the heat had grown uncomfortable. "Damn, that's hot," he told Joanne. She had grinned at him. "Aw, want me to kiss it and make it better?" "Yeah," Marco replied, choking, and then her lips had been on his, touching slightly, clumsy, fleeting. Then Reggie had been ready, and they'd been bustled to the party, and Marco's head hadn't stopped reeling. Nothing more ever happened with Joanne, but Marco had always associated the fire of cinnamon with the breathless rush of that first kiss. His heartbeat quickened, and his cheeks warmed with the memory. More memories came, the coarse feel of his first dog's fur, the thrill of exploring the woods with him, the cheap beer that had been on his tongue when he'd asked out the hottest woman in the bar, the accompanying shame when she had laughed. Grief as distant as an old toothache, triggered by the sounds of bug zappers, placed all over the mausoleum where his mother had been interred. As his senses were stimulated by different sounds, tastes, odours and feelings, memories surged, leaving him angry, thrilled, shamed, and grief-stricken. Memories of Penelope kept surfacing. Her perfume, the feel of her straight black hair, the sound she made when they made love, and the ratty Notre Dame sweatshirt she'd been wearing the day she'd received the letter of patronage and had dumped him. After his envious, childish tantrum. Shame. Grief. It overwhelmed him. His chest tightened, his tears floated off into the viscous liquid. Please let me think about something else. Stop reminding me about Penelope, he thought. He'd burned dinner the night his letter rejecting patronage came through, drank beer instead. The taste of the hot, thick bile of the subsequent hangover flooded his mouth, and the same impotent rage bloomed in his chest. They continued to come. At this point, Marco began to sob, overwhelmed. No matter whether the emotion the Legion triggered, he sobbed more, despair and confusion taking over. He felt wind on his face, reminding him of the roller coaster he'd been on as a child, but he sobbed still. No more, please. 15 minutes has to have passed. It has to end soon, he thought, feeling the tingling rush of sexual excitement as he heard the deep thumping of the drum and bass music Penelope liked to make love to. Even after she left, the sound of that music never failed to stimulate him, and he hated it. And he hated the memory it brought with it. The shame of his arousal, of knowing they were watching, monitoring him, caused him to flail about again, screaming through his sobs into the mask, even as the sensations increased, causing him undeniable pleasure, despite his attempts to ignore it, despite his embarrassment, and he wept as he shuddered in release. The music pounding in his head, the scent of Penelope in his nostrils, and pure hatred for the bastards who did this to him. All sensation ceased. He panted, bit hard on the mask, tried to calm himself. He could suddenly feel his hair, wet and matted, cool in the air. He realized the fluid was draining, his skin finally able to feel again. Once the fluid went below his eyes, he blinked and could see through the glass at the impassive aliens watching him. 13 watched the computer bank connected to his tank. As the fluid drained, a speaker popped to life above him. "That was excellent, Marco. Thank you," said 13's voice. "We're going to recommend you go back to your quarters now. You likely will want a shower and rest." Significant team. How's everybody doing?
I think that's even rougher than I remember.
That is nasty.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Shani Opal says it best. Fucking yikes. Let's carry on. Oh, before we do, I actually have a sensory deprivation tank story to tell you, which will amuse you tremendously in the exact way that didn't.
Which is nothing like this, correct?
Yes. The Mercury 13, who were the 13 female astronauts who private industry put through the same training exercises as the original 7 American astronauts. By the way, they aced it. They scored higher across the board and, of course, weren't chosen. But one of them, and I forget the lady's name, was asked about her time in the sensory deprivation tank. And she said, "Yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great. Couldn't feel anything, couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. Sang every song I knew, recited bits of the Bible, a few limericks. And then after a while, this voice went, 'Hey, Mickey.' And I went, 'Yeah.' They went, 'Do you want to come out now?' And I said, 'I've been in here like 10 minutes. And they said, 'No, it's been 15 hours, Mickey. We're bringing you out.' I was like, 'Okay.'" Never underestimate people like that. Very cool.
I think your question is about to be answered, Ash. Hang in there.
There was no timer on the shower this time, and Marco stayed in it for 20 minutes. Hot water turning his skin red, his head leaning against the frosted glass of the shower. The silk robe had been replaced by a soft, puffy cotton one, and he dried off and wrapped it around himself, recognizing the smell of cookies as he wrapped himself in the robe, resenting it, but still, accepting the calm it gave him. His brain tried to register surprise that Heather sat in his room when he came out of the bathroom, but he was just too tired. "So doors don't lock around here, do they?" he asked. Her thin fingers wrapped around a steaming blue mug. She reached to the table and passed him an identical one. This one full of coffee. He accepted it. "Our patrons don't have anything to hide, and they don't think we should either. You can probably guess they don't have a lot of understanding of shame or nudity." He thought of the situation he'd just been through, and his stomach twisted. He sipped at the coffee to keep from shaking. "I don't have anything to hide. Not anymore." "It is rough," she agreed. "Did you go through that?" "Does everyone?" he asked, sitting on his bed and pulling the covers over his legs. His sheets had been changed to soft linen that brought to mind the scent of lavender, and he drank deeply of the strong coffee. She regarded him over her mug. "Of course they do. I told you, the Legion do not feel passion. This is how they merge sensory output, how they put taste in a locket or a song into a dress. So do they want me for my writing and illustration skills, or my memories and emotions?" Her brown eyes didn't waver. "I honestly don't know." He put down the empty mug, which had suddenly become too heavy. "Do I have to go through that again?" he asked in a very small voice. The red granny, whom he had recently witnessed kill 2 people in arena blood sports, rose from her chair and came over to him. She sat on the bed and wrapped her arms tight around him. "Oh no, dear, you won't have to go through that again. Not ever. They've got all your sensory emotional connections. They don't need more." He leaned into her, accepting the maternal care, and closed his eyes. The scent of cookies and lavender seeped away, and he smelled her warm baby powder and sweet coffee. He didn't have any tears left, so he just let her hold him. And through this comfort, a cold voice in the back of his mind reminded him that her words were less than comforting. He found it odd that everything that had happened to him that day had happened before 10 o'clock. After his phone chimed with a text saying his agent wanted to see him, Heather left his room and he dressed and went to meet Catherine for brunch. Despite the dark circles under his eyes, Marco felt calmer and grounded, ready to discuss with his agent the terms of his patronage. He was still unsure, but felt better after the shower and the quiet encouragement from Heather. "Hey, Ma!" Catherine entered the restaurant like the force of nature she was. "Marco! There you are!" she called in her raspy voice, causing many patrons to stare first at her and then at him. He gave a little wave and fought the desire to hide. Catherine stood nearly 2 meters tall, with curly blonde hair down the middle of her back and a huge smile. Marco had thought she looked like a natural beauty that had been somehow enhanced using paint software, complete with missing pixels and distortions. She carried 2 large purses that Marco knew from experience were not her luggage, but simply what she needed for everyday work. She dropped her bags beside her chair and put her hands on her hips. "Well, aren't you glad to see me? Where's my hug?" Fighting the urge to remind her that she had dumped him 2 days prior, Marco stood up and embraced her gently, which didn't stop her from crushing him to her formidable chest. "I'm so glad to see you, Marco. This is going to be exciting. Let's order mimosas to celebrate, then we can go over the contract." She plopped down into her chair and picked up a menu. "They don't have mimosas at this restaurant, Catherine. The orange juice and coffee is quite excellent." "No mimosas? I'll have a Bloody Mary." Marco wondered if he should just let her be disappointed. A Legion waiter approached them wearing a sheath over his body that identified him as House Orange. "No, the Legion don't drink, and they don't like it when humans do. It's hard to get a drink up here." "Oh, that's harsh. I had no idea. I thought Mollywood was where the Alcoholics Guild was based," she asked. He shrugged. "You can get a drink, just not from a Legion establishment. They haven't outlawed it, they just don't serve it, and, well, they run most of the businesses up here." She slapped the menu shut. All right then, we'll skip the celebratory drink and save it for later. Now, let's talk contract. Marco held up his hand. Catherine, let me stop you. I'm not sure I'm taking the patronage. What the bloody hell are you talking about? She said, louder than Marco preferred. Of course you're bloody taking it. No one ever turns down a patronage. Marco felt his calm slip. That doesn't mean it won't happen. I don't fit in here. I don't like it. You've been here a day. What could have happened in a day? Catherine waved her arms and nearly whacked the Legion waiter. Good morning. What can I get for you? He said smoothly, as if Catherine hadn't nearly punched him. You can get me an explanation, Catherine said. You can tell me why this boy won't accept Legion patronage after being in Mollywood only one day. I'm sure I do not know, the alien said. Would madam like a coffee? Decaf, perhaps. Catherine waved her hand. Sure, bring 2. The waiter glided away, and Marco wondered if he would ever be able to make a decision for himself again. Have you heard the contract terms? Is that what you're mad about? She asked. No, Marco said. What have you done since you've been here? Well, I met House Blue. I moved in. I went to the most dangerous game last night. Went out for drinks. Legion drinks, he added, seeing her raised eyebrow. And then... He couldn't bring himself to begin to explain what he had been through that morning. He'd never called something rape that didn't involve an actual sexual assault, but he felt shamed, exposed, bruised, completely unwilling to discuss his experience. Then, I had a meeting with them this morning that showed me I didn't really want to get involved with them. He didn't meet her eyes. Oh, is this the artist mapping? He looked up. What? The artist mapping. It's how they combine all the art concepts. They map the emotions of the artist and store them for later use. His cheeks flushed. Is that what they call it? Yes, you're not technically supposed to do it until we sign the contract, she said, digging through her massive purse. She pulled out a tablet and punched some commands on the screen. If they made you do it before signing, then we could likely leverage more money out of them. But don't worry about it. I hear it can be intense, but everyone goes through it. No biggie. Pardon me. Marco felt an irrational desire to strangle her. Or perhaps it was rational. He wasn't sure. He just wanted to make her understand that what he went through was not no biggie. She looked up from her tablet when he didn't say anything. You all right? Marco opened his mouth, and still found that the shame was powerful enough to keep him quiet. Intense. Yeah. It was. She waved her hand. Still, it's over now. Now, yeah, that's the worst part about patronage. You know, you rake in the dough and create all day. Isn't that what you always wanted? I didn't know the price before, he thought. Out loud, he said, why didn't you tell me this was going to happen? Well, if you'd studied patronage instead of pouted for the last 4 years, you would have known about it. There are books written on this shit, Marco. Besides, as I said, you weren't supposed to go through it until you signed the contract, which, she scooted her chair around the table, oblivious of getting in the way of the waitstaff, I have right here. She put the table in front of him. It was mostly a lot of legal text that made his eyes glaze over on the tablet screen, but she pointed to a number. There. Does that change your mind? It was impressive. Twice what he made on Earth. That's my yearly salary. Catherine grinned widely. No, Marco. That's your monthly salary. He felt the spit in his mouth dry up. Her long purple fingernail traced other clauses of the contract as she listed them. You get the money and become part of House Blue. That includes housing, meals, wardrobe, use of vehicles, and seating at all entertainment House Blue attends. She cocked an eyebrow at Marco. What you apparently got last night. Now, what you give them is exclusivity, of course. No working for another house. You will submit to artist mapping. You will deliver 1 graphic novel and 6 original pieces of art a year. They will take your work and enhance it with sensory art as they see fit and sell it for what price they want. Your salary is the same whether you are a bestseller or a flop. At the end of the year, you both have a chance to renegotiate. If you're a flop, they can dump you, or you can ask for more if you're a hit. She lit up a lumen. Look, Marco, the worst part is over. If you're upset about the early mapping, we can demand more. Is there something else you want? Anything else in the contract you want to change? Marco sat feeling like an empty husk. Tears pricked at his eyes. He brushed at them impatiently. I feel like I've been handed everything I ever wanted, and it's hollow. Catherine blew smoke out the side of her mouth and leaned forward, lumen smoke, making her voice even rougher than usual. If it was that bad, Marco, we can make them pay. And what did you have on Earth? Seriously. You're in a different place. This is your chance to turn everything around. You have money, new opportunities. Shit, take the patronage for a year, bank the money, move back to Earth and live on your riches. Like I said, you won't be mapped again. This is your dream, Marco. But it's not empty. I promise. The waiter brought their coffee. Suddenly hungry, Marco ordered a huge breakfast. They ate in near silence. When they were done, he wiped his mouth and sat up a little straighter. Well, this morning was the worst experience of my life, Catherine, so if they want to keep me, I want double. She choked on her coffee and started to stammer, but he kept his gaze steady. She guzzled her water to stop choking and then sat back, panting. Well, if that's what you want. Marco grinned slightly. Well, you are the best in the business, right? The whole way through that chapter, all I was thinking was this week on a very special episode of Ditch Diggers.
Oof.
Red Crystal, I'm really sorry. I hope you're alright.
What I take away from this is that Catherine knew of the existence of artist mapping, but probably has zero idea what it actually involves.
Yes.
And poor Marco certainly didn't.
Apparently I'm back to super deep voice.
Oh no. All right. How about this? Why don't we take a break for a minute or two? In fact, this might be a very good time to take a break just anyway. We've been going for a little bit over an hour. I will troubleshoot the mic again. Everybody stand up and take a stretch, and we'll come back in a few minutes. How's that sound?
Back in a few, folks. And we're back. Thank you so much for sticking with us, folks. And also, thank you for reassuring me, because I've been looking at the chat as I sat back down in the 56 seconds of countdown. And yeah, this is intense, but this is really, really good stuff. And also, Mer, your thing of how do I write like this again? You already have. You do all the time. Just do the thing. You got this. Jax, you could absolutely cosplay me. And that reality breaking concept is one I'm going to leave sit in your brain for a while as we do the last little bit of tonight.
Mini Alistair.
You aren't. Jax, you're a small me. You're a small me.
So cute.
2 weeks later, Marco was in his office in an artist colony. His prominence at House Blue had given him a top floor office with a window looking out over the city with a specific angle on Platt Park. To the south of the park was Burns Studios, where House Verdant produced movies, and Pamela's Peak, a music studio built into a hill with natural moonrock walls providing perfect noise dampening. 20,000 words into his new graphic novel script. He was stuck. He ran his hand through his hair, noting the need for another haircut. Oh, fuck, I need a drink, he muttered. Heather had shown him the best Legion restaurants, and he'd discovered some new Earth cuisines he hadn't had a chance to try at home. But he actually hadn't had a drink at a bar, something so simple. Time spent with her, when she wasn't training, was odd. He found himself more agitated, but more grounded at the same time. He was both happier and more likely to question his patronage, even though he had experienced no problems at all since the initial mapping. Heather always made him tea and listened intently. He knew the Legion frowned on alcohol, but it wasn't completely forbidden. He was allowed to go anywhere and ride base. He was an adult, right? So he got up from his sparse desk, locked down his computer, and left his office. He'd become pretty familiar with the Legion section of the city, and had even gotten to know some of the other authors in his colony. He was surprised to see his office was beside one of his favourites, in fact, Kay Ing, and he was much too shy to talk to her for the first few weeks. But he finally introduced himself and found her friendly and welcoming, if distracted. None of the artists would talk about their mapping experiences. It still invaded his dreams sometimes. His memories, his senses overwhelming, drowning him, making him frightened and delighted and horny and angry all at once. He developed a bad habit of chewing on his lip, worrying the sore skin there whenever he remembered the experience. He went back to his room and changed from his House Blue outfit to his old clothes. He carried his satchel with his tablet with him, putting on the House Blue light jacket from his wardrobe. Seven saw him and he waved, saying he was going to a coffee house to write. He still hadn't warmed to the brusque alien, but he found if he did his work, Seven left him alone. He and Heather were still the only humans in House Blue. Marco made his way to the monorail, and when he got on the shuttle, he took off the jacket and stuffed it in the satchel. He sat down near a human family and watched the city flow by. He had learned depressingly little about the lunar colony since joining House Blue. 6 and 7 were always willing to take him out, but only to 2-2-2 or to watch the most dangerous game from their box. But the games weren't as exciting without the Red Granny to root for, and the blood sports disgusted him. He had visited some shops to modify his wardrobe, always with escort, but he had his own credit card, and it was never said that he wasn't permitted to go into the city. The train emerged from a tunnel into a market area that swarmed with people, with a daytime that lasted 15 Earth days, and people from all around the world residing in the colony. Many areas were open all the time. There wasn't much of a slow time on the moon. When the Americans were hitting the bars, the Filipinos were hitting the breakfast joints. So many people, Marco muttered. He'd known Mollywood had about 3 million residents, but he never really thought about how many that was when you didn't allow for suburbs. There would be no expanding, unless the Legion facilitated it, of course. No suburban sprawl to get away from the city. The high-rises and, he later found, the tunnel residences were all they had. Only needing two Earth hours to rest a day, the Legion kept to the GMT time zone, and most of their artists did too. So the people he encountered while out were either Western, European, or artists of all nationalities with alien patrons. Restaurants district, world cuisine, pubs, the robotic voice said over their heads in English, then Spanish, then Mandarin, then Cantonese, then Hindi, then in a couple of dialects Marco didn't recognize. He rose to his feet and exited the monorail. In the Legion section of the city, his clothes were immediately recognized as being of Legion quality, and he was assumed to be a very wealthy man with alien tastes, or an artist with patronage. In other parts of the moon, it was much easier to blend in. Here, the humans noticed Legion clothes only when the aliens themselves wore them, which was on rare or special occasions. The aliens also rarely went to the human areas, so spotting one, or indeed being spotted by one, was pretty unlikely. Marco considered a Chinese restaurant, then a Japanese, then Mexican, and nearly entered an Indian doorway when he noticed stairs down from the street with an old-fashioned shingle hanging from the doorway. Propulsion, it said, and underneath it was a wooden carving of an astronaut opening a beer in space and being blown back by the force of the carbonation. Gin. That's what he needed. He'd get food after. He went down the sticky steps and entered the bar. A strong, sickly odour of beer hit his nostrils and he winced. It had been a while since he'd had a drink, but he didn't expect it to be this overpowering. 3 people slumped at the bar, 2 women and a man, and the barkeep eyed him over a pint glass, his bushy eyebrows knitting together as if he pegged Marco as a stranger. A man slumped in the corner, overcoat pulled around him, and snored quietly. 2 men argued in a booth, trying to keep their slurred voices down, clearly failing. It sounded like a lover's quarrel. Marco approached the bar. "Can I get a gin and tonic?" he asked. The barkeep looked him up and down. "Aren't you a little far from home?" he asked, his British accent. Yes, thick.
You didn't notice that in advance, did you?
No.
I was just going to do a content warning. Accents.
Marco knew what he meant, but he said, "We all are. About 240,000 miles, right?" "You're a pet. You're a pet of those aliens. You sure you should be here?" Marco shrugged uncomfortably. "Are you saying you won't serve me? My money's as good elsewhere." The barkeeper's bushy brown eyebrows rose slightly. Marco wondered if he was supposed to be shamed or embarrassed for working with the Legion. The barkeep began pouring well gin into a glass. "Not saying that at all. Just figured you would know the aliens don't like drunks." "One drink does not a drunk make," Marco said, sitting down on a stool, passing his credit card to the bartender. "It's not where you start, mate. It's where you finish." The bartender put his drink down. "Call me when you need another one." Marco nodded and sipped at his drink, wincing at the cheap, flowery taste. This was not a night for fine cocktails. The bartender returned and slid something across the bar. Looked like a pack of gum. "There, on the ass. You'll need them for your return." "Look, they never said I couldn't drink," Marco argued, shoving the pack back. "What's the big deal?" One of the men slumped at the bar spoke up, looking at his empty pint glass. With another British accent, he said, "You want to find out the big deal, then you go back tonight with gin on your breath and a stagger in your step." Marco looked around, uncomfortable heat rising to his face. He looked at the exposed neck of the bartender and the other British man. "He's actually American, I'm cheating." And the bartender had a 6 tattooed on the side of his neck. The other British man had a 9. The other people at the bar, whose necks he could see anyway, were adorned with a 1, a 9, a 2. Alcoholics Guild, he thought. Just my luck. Oddly, he knew more about the protocol of dealing with guild members than he knew about the Legion when he reached Mollywood, and when the bartender offered him another drink, he did not turn it down. Marco indicated the tattoo on the bartender's neck. "If the Legion don't like alcohol, then why don't they kick you guys out of the colony?" "You mean beside the fact that Earth won't have us?" Marco shrugged. "Yeah, I guess. Press love us, poor drunken slobs who celebrate their sickness and can never go home so long as we got these on our necks." Pointed to a 6. "If the Legion kicked us out, it would not be a quiet thing. And the press might ask why they don't want alcohol or bars anywhere. And the Legion don't want to answer that direct question, so they regulate it. Heavily. They try to keep their pets out of bars. So that's why we're trying to keep you safe, puppy. Marco swallowed his gin, deliberately not rising to the barb. He turned to the other British man to ask him a question, but the man had focused on the door to their right. Opposite the door to the street, it looked to be the door that opened to the tunnels. Everyone in the bar, including the man slumped on the floor, straightened a little when two people came through. One was a little man, no more than 5.5 feet, with black slick-back hair and a really nice suit. In one hand was a golden flask, and around his neck was a crucifix. Tattooed on his neck was a 12. The bar focused on the man, but it was the woman beside him whom Marco couldn't stop staring at. Her black hair was longer, but she no longer wore the turtleneck. Instead, she proudly displayed the black 11 on her neck as her bloodshot eyes focused on him. Penelope? And that's where we'll leave it for the week.